But our focus is going to be on who is funding Hamas, even as we're taking a look at the 11th day of the Israel-Hamas war and the crisis in Gaza. The latest updates, the latest death toll figures, and what is being looked at on day 11 right there on your screens, ladies and gentlemen. At least 2,800 people have been killed and more than 10,000 people have been wounded. All of this as a result of the Israeli airstrikes, ladies and gentlemen. Those airstrikes and the constant bombardment continues even as 1,400 Israelis have been killed in this Israel-Hamas war. According to the Israeli Defense Forces, 6 lakh Palestinians moved from the northern part of the strip to southern Gaza, and another lakhs Palestinians are expected to move as well. This all happening on the 11th day of the Israel-Hamas war, ladies and gentlemen. Also, at the same time, what we're picking up is that Hamas has said that up to 250 captives have been held in Gaza, are in their custody, ladies and gentlemen. Now, Hamas demands the release of 6,000 Palestinian prisoners. The idea strikes Hezbollah targets in Lebanon, even as it accuses Iran for ordering Hezbollah for carrying out those strikes in the border with Lebanon up in the north of Israel. Meanwhile, the Gazans, they're saying that they're being forced to drink salty water because of no supply of fresh drinking water. On the diplomatic side, United States President Joe Biden is expected to visit Israel tomorrow. And all of this, even as Iran warns of preemptive action, and Netanyahu retorts by saying, do not test Israel.
מיד אחר כך קרין. בטח.
Well, meanwhile, Israeli forces have initiated preparations of tanks and aircraft for ground assault on Gaza. Now, this is part of Israel's efforts to target Hamas and its military infrastructure. But tensions between Egypt and Israel has been on the rise after the attack by Hamas and various other groups that are supported by Iran. Now, Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, he slammed Israel, saying its action in Gaza had exceeded its right to self-defense and had become collective punishment. It's important to note here that Egypt shares a narrow border with Gaza Strip that has remained largely blocked over the past week. Egypt has opened up its airport in the Al Arish to receive international assistance for Gazans, with planes arriving from Jordan, Turkey, and the United Arab Emirates. Combined with donations from Egypt, they have been loaded into more than 100 trucks, which are lined up in the northern Sinai Peninsula and ready to enter Gaza through the Rafah crossing, albeit the Rafah crossing remains closed. However, Israel has not given a favorable response to the aid being sent to Gaza, resulting in tensions between both the countries. Now, tensions have also risen due to bombardment at the Rafah crossing as well. So Egypt wants Israel to allow aid to come into the Gaza Strip for all those that are battling with a deepening humanitarian crisis. No food, no water, no fuel, no energy, and a lack of hope as well. Desperation amidst darkness, ladies and gentlemen. These are some aerial shots of the Rafah crossing as well. Now, Egypt's government had repeatedly warned the Israeli government of an impending attack from Gaza, but it was ignored. Several Palestinians in Gaza hold dual citizenship, and Egypt has been asking for their safe passage. All of this in a meeting with United States Secretary of State Anthony Blinken. The Egyptian president said that Israel is trapping the 2.3 million residents of Gaza. On the other hand, on the exact other hand of this diplomatic divide, United States is picking troops to prepare for potential deployment to the Middle East. Now, the US military has selected roughly 2,000 troops to prepare for a potential deployment to support Israel. US defense officials have corroborated this information as well. Now, the troops are tasked with missions like advising and medical support because since they are from across the US and its armed services, they are not going to be intended to serve in a combatant role. No infantry has been put on prepare to deploy order, albeit 2,000 US troops are on prepare to deploy order. They won't be fighting, they're going to be advising and assisting in medical support. Now, the troops are currently stationed both inside the Middle East and outside, including Europe. Now, it isn't clear under what circumstances the US could deploy the troops or to where, but the Pentagon's decision signaled it's preparing to support Israeli troops should Israel launch a ground incursion into Gaza. It is unclear how many of those troops, should they be deployed, would go into Israel. But the official said that at least some of them could enter the country to support Israeli forces. Now, pre-deployment order doesn't mean the troops will certainly deploy, but rather shortens the time troops need to be ready to move. United States Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, he was earlier in Israel. He met with United States troops in Israel and checked in on a shipment of supplies for the Israeli Defense Forces as well. He had told the troops back then that he appreciated their work and said that Israelis would likely, quote unquote, need a lot more stuff. On the other hand, United States President Joe Biden will visit Israel tomorrow for talks with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And to make clear Israel has the right to defend itself, Secretary of State Antony Blinken announced on Tuesday the remarks and confirmed that Joe Biden will, in fact, be there on Wednesday. Let's quickly listen in to what Antony Blinken had to say.
On Wednesday, President Biden will visit Israel. He's coming here at a critical moment for Israel, for the region, and for the world. And he's coming here to do the following. First, the President will reaffirm the United States' solidarity with Israel and our ironclad commitment to its security. President Biden will again make clear, as he's done unequivocally since Hamas's slaughter of more than 1,400 people, including at least 30 Americans, that Israel has the right and indeed the duty to defend its people from Hamas and other terrorists and to prevent future attacks. The President will hear from Israel what it needs to defend its people as we continue to work with Congress to meet those needs. Second, President Biden will underscore our crystal clear message to any actor, state or non-state, trying to take advantage of this crisis to attack Israel. Don't. To that end, he's deployed 2 aircraft carrier groups and other military assets to the region. Third, the President will continue to coordinate closely with our Israeli partners to secure the release of hostages taken by Hamas, including men, women, small children, Holocaust survivors, and American citizens, as an indispensable humanitarian effort. Fourth, President Biden will receive a comprehensive brief on Israel's war aims and strategy. Fifth, the President will hear from Israel how it will conduct its operations in a way that minimizes civilian casualties and enables humanitarian assistance to flow to civilians in Gaza in a way that does not benefit Hamas. To that end, today, and at our request, the United States and Israel have agreed to develop a plan that will enable humanitarian aid from donor nations and multilateral organizations to reach civilians in Gaza, and them alone, including the possibility of creating areas to help keep civilians out of harm's way. It is critical that aid begin flowing into Gaza as soon as possible. We share Israel's concern that Hamas may seize or destroy aid entering Gaza or otherwise preventing it from reaching the people who need it. If Hamas in any way blocks humanitarian assistance from reaching civilians, including by seizing the aid itself, we'll be the first to condemn it, and we will work to prevent it from happening again. We welcome the government of Israel's commitment to work on this plan, The President very much looks forward to discussing it further when he's here on Wednesday.
Well, now the Pentagon has deployed 2 aircraft carriers to the eastern Mediterranean, the Ford carrier and the Eisenhower carrier, along with their supporting ships. Washington says these massive warships are intended to send a message to the region as the war rages on between its ally Israel and Iran-backed Palestinian terrorist group Hamas. Here's a closer look at what that means.
The Pentagon has deployed 2 aircraft carriers to the eastern Mediterranean, the Ford carrier and the Eisenhower carrier, along with their supporting ships. Washington says these massive warships are intended to send a message to the region as war rages on between its ally Israel and Iran-backed Palestinian militants Hamas. Here's a closer look at what that means. The Gerald R. Ford carrier is the U.S.'s newest aircraft carrier and the world's largest. It holds 5,000 sailors, a nuclear reactor, and an arsenal of missiles used to counter drones and aircraft. It can also hold more than 75 military aircraft, including fighter jets, and comes along with several supporting warships. The nuclear-powered Dwight Eisenhower Carrier Strike Group first carried out operations during Iraq's invasion of Kuwait. It has 5,000 sailors and can carry up to 9 squadrons of aircraft, like fighter jets, helicopters, and those capable of carrying out intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance operations. The carriers would bolster Washington's presence in a region that already hosts a number of U.S. military ships, planes, and troops. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said on Sunday the aircraft carriers are not meant to be a provocation but a deterrence, to ensure the conflict does not expand throughout the region. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin called them a sign of, quote, our resolve to deter any state or non-state actor seeking to escalate this war. But it might not be seen that way to others. Turkey, a long supporter of a 2-state solution, has said the ships are meant to commit, quote, serious massacres in the Gaza Strip. And Iran has already threatened significant damages to the U.S. should the war escalate.
On the other hand, the spokesperson for Israel's military said that a visit by U.S. President Joe Biden to Israel would have strategic importance for the entire Middle East.
The visit of the President of the United States has strategic importance. Strategic importance for the entire Middle East, and influence in that is the most senior figure in the United States is coming to Israel at the time of war, getting review of the war situation that talks of the different scenarios in the Middle East and the steps that will need to be taken in the event that Israel change.
Well, meanwhile, shifting our focus here, the Amazon River fell to its, lowest level in centuries. But before we move on to that, ladies and gentlemen, the Israeli military has been talking about a significant military operation for days, and Israeli forces haven't actually gone into the area yet. They've gathered troops and equipment, but no invasion has happened so far. So why has Israel not launched its ground operation yet? Why the delay? Israel's been talking about sending their troops into Gaza, and it's been seen as a big concern for many. But more than 1 million people in the northern part of Gaza have left their homes because of constant airstrikes. Last Sunday, the Israeli Defense Forces told the people in the northern half of the area that they had about 3 hours to get out. It seems there might be a delay due to bad weather. The airstrikes have caused significant damage in Gaza, and the weather conditions are making it even harder for Israeli pilots and drone operators to support the ground troops. According to the 3 military officers, Israel aims to eliminate top Hamas leaders in Gaza, but it's tough in such a cramped and populated area. Now, reportedly, Palestinian terrorists have kidnapped about 160 Israelis in Gaza. There's concern that these captives might be used as human shields when Israeli forces enter Gaza. Now, there is a delay, possibly because of the inclement weather, like I was talking about. Weather conditions are hampering Israeli pilots' air cover for soldiers. They can't support their ground battalions. The Israeli Defense Forces are going to launch the ground invasion once all civilians evacuate Gaza. From last time we checked, still a couple of lakh left to leave North Gaza completely. Now, the other ground invasion challenge. The fighting is going to take place in narrow and a densely populated land, and it certainly can be challenging. On the other hand, there is a growing fear that Hamas will use the hostages as human shields. Additionally, Hamas uses a network of tunnels as well, bunkers under the Gaza city and the northern Gaza, and it might hinder Israeli operations. Only Hamas knows the full extent of the network of the tunnels, and also there are booby traps in those particular territories as well. As these tunnels make Israel's plan to eliminate the Hamas far more complicated. And now, in the aftermath of these October 7th attacks originating from the Gaza Strip, a growing chorus of voices in Israel is demanding the ouster of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. What's striking is this call is transcending political divides, with Israelis from the right to the center uniting in the belief that the Israeli government's response has been a failure. Some are going even further, advocating for Netanyahu to face trial. Now, those supporting his removal argue that he not only bears responsibility for the October 7 events, but has also lost the trust of the Israeli people.
Solution with our Palestinian neighbors. And for all these reasons,
bracing for a major war, Israelis furious over their government's failure to prevent the bloodshed are grappling with the provocative question: can accountability wait until the war? Netanyahu's hold on power has weakened due to the ongoing corruption trial. All this is criticism against the Israeli Prime Minister. President Joe Biden expressed concerns about Israel's judicial changes. That's also a reason why so many protests are taking place. Netanyahu was also under fire for having ignored repeated warnings from Egypt. Israel was also caught by surprise amid a major intelligence failure on the 7th of October. That's how people are analyzing that particular response. Now, in response to the latest reports, we have a News9 correspondent, Manish Jha, at the Rafah border. Take a closer look regarding Hamas's claims of an Israeli strike on the Rafah crossing.
ऑपरेशन से ठीक पहले अपना जोश बढ़ाते हुए एक दूसरे का सैनिकों को देखिए जो इस वक्त ऑपरेशन से पहले किस तरह जोश में और समझिए कि वो हमास को क्या मैसेज दे रहे हैं। वो साफ तौर पर ये कह रहे हैं कि वो तैयार हैं उस लड़ाई के लिए जो इजराइल के लिए, इजराइल के अस्तित्व के लिए सबसे बड़ी और खतरनाक लड़ाई हो सकती है। और उसके लिए इस वक्त आप देखिए, जब कहते हैं आप कि हाउ इज द जोश, तो ये देखिए जो जोश इनका इस वक्त आपको दिखाई दे रहा है। ये सोल्जर्स जो इस जगह पर मौजूद हैं और उनके बीच आपने देखा कि किस तरीके से ये सब एक दूसरे के साथ अपना मनोबल बढ़ाते हुए और एक दूसरे को सपोर्ट करते हुए, क्योंकि इन्हें पता है कि ये किस असाइनमेंट पर जा रहे हैं और वो असाइनमेंट कितना डेंजरस होगा। सो आपने इनके जोश और जज्बे को देखा और इसी जज्बे के साथ ये ग्राउंड ऑपरेशन के लिए आगे बढ़ रहे हैं और इन्हीं लोगों को आगे जाकर गाजा स्ट्रिप में सुरंगों के भीतर से घुस कर हमास के आतंकियों को सफाया करना है। इन्हीं लोगों को उन बंधकों की रिहाई करनी है। इन्हीं लोगों को जाकर अपने दुश्मनों के बीच में से जाकर अपने इजरायली लोगों को छुड़ा कर लाना है। और उससे पहले ये लोग एक दूसरे का मनोबल बढ़ाते हुए यहाँ पर ठीक बॉर्डर के पास मौजूद हैं, जहाँ से हम आपको दिखाने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं इनके जोश को, इनके जज्बे को, ताकि आप देख सकें और समझ सकें कि अभी फिलहाल इजराइल के बॉर्डर की स्थिति क्या है।
Meanwhile, in terms of the unity government, there are a lot of criticism against the Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister. We were earlier running those graphics and we'll show you those pointers exactly what it means for the unity government. Now, Gantz and Netanyahu formed the unity government amid the Hamas attacks. This is essentially a timeline of what's really happened. It's going to be a war-focused cabinet, which is led by Netanyahu, Gantz, and Gallant, the defense minister himself. Now, observer members include former chief of staff and another minister. This is the unity government. But is it all political face-saving for Benjamin Netanyahu? That is the larger criticism that has now come across. Focus is always going to be on security and not on legislation. The judicial reforms, which many were calling a judicial overreach from the Netanyahu government, has been a reason of protest for the longest time in Israel.
TV9 भारतवर्ष की टीम इस वक्त राफा क्रॉसिंग पर है। ये वो जगह है जो इजराइल का वो पॉइंट है जहां पर गाजा पट्टी और इजिप्ट के बीच का रास्ता खुलता है। फिलहाल दुनिया के केंद्र में बन गया है ये जगह, वो इसलिए क्योंकि गाजा पट्टी में 600 के करीब अमेरिकन सिटीजन हैं। इसके अलावा जो तमाम विदेशी गाजा पट्टी में फंसे हैं उनको निकालने के लिए अमेरिका और दूसरे देश चाहते हैं कि राफा क्रॉसिंग के जरिए इजिप्ट में निकलने का उनको मौका दिया जाए। वहीं दूसरी तरफ इजिप्ट में सैकड़ों की संख्या में ट्रक राहत सामग्री लेकर इंतजार कर रहे हैं कि वो गाजा पट्टी के अंदर घुसे। ये सब कुछ होगा कहां से? इस जगह से जहां पर TV9 का कैमरा आपको दिखाई दे रहा है। वहीं दूसरी तरफ देखिए, जो लगातार यहां पर ट्रैफिक है उसमें लगातार जो आर्मी के व्हीकल्स हैं, टैंक और दूसरी और तमाम चीज़ें दिखाई देती है। बहुत बड़ा बेस यहाँ पर है जहाँ पर कि मैंने खुद ही हजारों के करीब में सोल्जर्स को देखा। तो ये राफा क्रॉसिंग के पॉइंट से TV9 आपको रिपोर्ट करके बता रहा है कि आज की तारीख में सिचुएशन क्या है। और खबर यही है कि अभी फिलहाल जब ईरान के विदेश मंत्री ने यह दावा किया है कि हमास अपने 200 बंधकों को छोड़ने के लिए तैयार है, बशर्ते कि हमास की शर्त मानी जाए और इजराइल एयर स्ट्राइक न करे। इन सब के केंद्र बिंदु में अब अगले डेवलपमेंट का इंतजार है, जब राफा क्रॉसिंग में बहुत कुछ आपको देखने को मिलेगा। सबसे पहले जो अमेरिकन सिटीजन हैं उनकी रिहाई इस क्रॉसिंग से होते हुए दिखेगी।
Well, now Iran not necessarily seeing Israel eye to eye, but at the same time, Egypt's concerns with what's really happening in Gaza has also been looked at by various top leaders from across the world. But Iran's preemptive warning to Israel, that is going to be our focus next. Amid the Israel-Hamas war and the deepening humanitarian crisis in Gaza, Iran's top envoys have said that a preemptive action could be expected in the coming hours, adding that Israel will not be allowed to take any action in the Gaza Strip without facing consequences. Now, leaders of the resistance will not allow the Zionist regime to take any action in Gaza. All options are open, and we cannot be indifferent to the war crimes committed against the people of Gaza. This is the foreign minister of Iran who's talking to the state television. He also said the resistance front is capable of waging a long-term war with the enemy. Now, in the coming hours, we can expect a preemptive action by the resistance front, is what the Iran foreign minister added. Now, last week, Iran's top authority, Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, said Tehran was not involved in the Tehran-backed terrorist Hamas group's attack on Israel on October 7th, but hailed what he called Israel's irreparable military and intelligence defeat. Backing the Palestinian cause has been a pillar of the Islamic Republic since the 1979 revolution, and a way the Shiite-dominated country has fashioned itself as a leader of the Muslim world. Now, Tehran says it gives moral and financial support to Hamas, which controls the Gaza Strip. Earlier on Monday, Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi said that while Tehran supported the Palestinian cause, the resistance front against Israel made its own independent decisions. Meanwhile, Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Nasser Kanani said in a televised press conference that the United States is already militarily involved in the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians. Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan and Iranian counterpart Ebrahim Raisi discussed possible steps the countries can take to end the fighting between Israeli and Palestinian forces in a phone call. Now, the Turkish presidency's office has also confirmed these reports. In a post on social messaging platform X, formerly known as Twitter, Erdogan's office said the president had told Raisi that Turkey was working to get humanitarian aid into Gaza and repeated his call to refrain from steps that could exacerbate the situation. Now, Israel has released a video showing attacks striking Hezbollah targets allegedly in Lebanon. The Israeli military, in a statement, has come out and said that the strikes came in response to attacks by Hezbollah at the Lebanon-Israel border on Sunday, which Israel had accused Iran of ordering. Lebanon's Hezbollah has been exchanging fire with Israel across the border for days in the deadliest escalation since they fought a major war in 2006, threatening to expand the conflict between Israel and Palestinian group Hamas. Backed by Iran, Hezbollah has said it is ready to help when the time comes in the war between Israel and Hamas, which is also backed by Tehran. Sources said last week Hezbollah's attacks so far had been designed to be contained and so avoid another major war. But to understand how the Hamas is operating, it's important to understand who is funding Hamas. The Hamas has been funded by the Arab world, and also as administrator of the Gaza region, it received funds from the United Nations. However, recently, the Hamas has a global financing network with funding in crypto, war equipment, etc. Banks in Israel have also been reported to provide funds to Hamas, like Barclay Bank. And Middle East countries like Qatar, Iran have been reported of funding Hamas since 2014. Now, Qatar has repeatedly been the biggest fund provider for Hamas. Iran has been providing funds to the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades, the armed wing of the Fatah, through Hezbollah facilitators. Hamas also raised funds through business taxes in and across the Gaza Strip, ladies and gentlemen. So that question of who is funding Hamas, well, these are the reasons and the funders in front of you. Iran has been providing funds to the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades. On the other hand, you've got Qatar, that has been one of the biggest donors of Hamas, and the Arab world collectively does so. The United Nations as well, because, well, the Gaza Strip is managed by the Hamas. Meanwhile, watch this moment. Watch this exact moment. We're going to take you through visuals where the Israeli Knesset members had to evacuate in the middle of a session due to sirens sounding off in Jerusalem.
ושם מצאו את מותם. אבל בתוך זה
אזעקה? סדרנים,
יש אזעקה, לדעתי. בואו.
אוקיי, לצאת בבקשה למסדרון חושן הסמוך. אני מודיע על הפסקה.
Members evacuated in the middle of the session because of sirens being sounded in Jerusalem. Meanwhile, military forensic teams in Israel have examined bodies of victims of last week's Hamas attack on communities around the Gaza Strip and found multiple signs of torture, rape, and other atrocities that were committed to them. Around 1,300 bodies have been brought to an army base in Ramlah in central Israel, where forensic checks to determine the identification of the dead and the circumstances of their death are being carried out by specialist teams. Around 90% of the military dead have been identified, and teams are halfway through identifying civilians as well. The coroners and the practitioners are saying that many bodies showed signs of torture as well as rape. But for the past 9 days, 450 volunteers, many from the tech sector, have put their private sector jobs aside to come and help try to locate the missing Israelis after the deadly Hamas attack, which killed at least 1,300 people. The deadliest single day in the state of Israel's 75-year history.
names of people that were there.
Of people, 450 volunteers. 450 volunteers that have now joined the fight to track the hostage situation, to find the missing Israelis. All these people have quit their private sector jobs, and since they belong from the tech sector, these tech-savvy people are now joining the efforts to search for the missing Israelis.
We have different desks here, and we have teams that are working on technology, cutting-edge technology like AI, like facial recognition, voice recognition, trying to match patterns of movements and all the stuff. On the other hand, we have people who are in social networks. What they do is basically they are the eyes on social networks of different movies, different photos that are relevant to the hostages. And then we have also a group of interrogators, we call them, information scientists, data scientists, that basically goes over all the data and try to assemble a picture of what we see here.
Well, even as the search for hostages and the missing is on, Israeli forces have initiated preparations of tanks and aircraft for ground assault on Gaza. This is part of Israel's efforts to target Hamas and its military infrastructure. Israeli aircraft carried out strikes on approximately 250 military targets, resulting in the death of the Hamas Southern District Commander as well. Israeli military chief, Lieutenant General Herzi Halevi, announced their intent to enter Gaza to eliminate the Hamas. Gaza has been under an Israeli blockade, limiting the entry of fuel, food and water. However, an agreement was reached with the United States to restore water supply to parts of southern Gaza. Israel's high-scale retaliation included extensive strikes on the Gaza Strip and its military infrastructure. Missile attacks have also been launched as part of the counter-offensive. And even as these ground offensive preparations are on, people are moving from the north to the south. In the south, you've got the Rafah crossing with Egypt, the only point of exit that is not controlled by Israel. So many people now crowding up at the Rafah border. My colleague brings you this report right from the Rafah crossing.
बॉर्डर पर अलग अलग हिस्सों में जाते हुए TV9 की टीम को एक ऐसी लोकेशन पर आने का मौका मिला है जहां पर कि सैकड़ों की संख्या में हम सोल्जर्स को भी देख रहे हैं और यहां पर कुछ जो संस्थाएं हैं वो यहां पर खाने का और दूसरी जो चीजें हैं वो इकट्ठा कर रही है. हाय सर, so I am Manish Jha from TV9. I am coming from India. So what is going on here?
Actually, what's happening here is going on very fast. We started last Sunday, a group of 6 people. We made 300 dishes. We bring our own money to start to do something good for the army. By Monday, we were 12 people, and we made about 600 dishes.
Can you show us how you guys are doing?
Of course. And by Thursday, we became a group of 500 people, making 10,000 dishes a day, only for the soldier who fight.
Okay, और मैं आपको बता दूं कि सिक्योरिटी की वजह से हम लोग लोकेशन नहीं दिखा रहे हैं कि हम कहां पर हैं, ये नहीं बता रहे हैं. यहाँ पर जो दर्जनों की नहीं बल्कि सैकड़ों की संख्या में जो सोल्जर्स हैं उनको किस तरह से वो खाना प्रोवाइड करा रहे हैं और फिर ये लोग खाने के पैकेट सब लेकर और फिर यहाँ से वो आगे बढ़ते हैं, क्योंकि ठीक यहाँ से कुछ दूरी पर स्थित जो लोग हैं जिनको युद्ध में यहाँ पर डिप्लॉय किया गया है उन सबको खाना मिल सके उसके लिए. ये एक ऐसी जगह है क्योंकि जंग के दौरान आपको सब कुछ चाहिए, आपको हथियार चाहिए, आपको तमाम तरह के रसद सामग्री चाहिए, लेकिन साथ ही साथ आपको खाने पीने की चीज़ें भी चाहिए, क्योंकि किसी को नहीं पता कि ये जंग कितनी लंबी चलने वाली है. और वैसी स्थिति में जब आप जंग के दरमियान देखते हैं कि किस तरह से आम लोग, आम इजरायली, तमाम जो इजरायली लोगों का संगठन है वो किस तरह से आगे बढ़कर अपने सैनिकों की मदद कर रहा है, क्योंकि उन्हें पता है कि जो लोग इस वक्त मातृभूमि की रक्षा के लिए आए हैं उनको वो इसी रूप में शायद मदद कर सकते हैं. What's your good name?
We're both Alma.
Okay. So would you like to say something? What you guys are doing?
We're helping and making food for the soldiers.
Okay.
And hope for the best for Israel. And yes.
तो आप इस वक्त देखिए एक तरफ अलग एज ग्रुप के लोग हैं, अलग अलग एज ग्रुप के लोग इस वक्त यहाँ पर मौजूद होकर अपने सैनिकों की मदद कर रहे हैं और वो मदद करने के लिए उन्हें लग रहा है कि अगर वो कुछ नहीं तो खाना पीना ही प्रोवाइड करके मदद कर सके। क्या है इजराइल की तैयारी, कितना है इजराइल के लोगों में जोश, क्योंकि उन्हें पता है कि ये उनकी वो लड़ाई है जिसके लिए हर इजरायली को आगे आना होगा। हर इजरायली हर रूप में, किसी के हाथ में हथियार है तो कोई बॉर्डर पर जा रहा है तो कोई बॉर्डर पर जाने वाले लोगों को खाना और दूसरी चीज़ें मुहैया करा रहा है ताकि वो इस देश की रक्षा के लिए, अपने तमाम इजरायली लोगों की रक्षा के लिए पूरी ताकत के साथ लड़ सके। इस वक्त TV9 की टीम आपको वो दिखाने की कोशिश कर रही है कि देखिए किस तरह से आम इजरायली और सैनिक एक दूसरे के साथ हैं। यहाँ पर लोग गाना गा के भी मनोबल भी बढ़ाते हैं, खाना पीना भी दे रहे हैं और यहाँ से अपने सैनिकों को विदा करते हैं फ्रंट लाइन पर जाने के लिए, इस उम्मीद के साथ कि अगले वक्त खाना खाने के लिए दोबारा से सोल्जर्स यहाँ पर पहुँच सके। तो यहाँ पर एक आराम करने की भी जगह है और साथ ही साथ यहाँ पर देखिए सबके लिए ये अस्तित्व की लड़ाई है और इस बात को समझते हुए हर कोई अपने अपने हिसाब से इसे कंट्रीब्यूट करने में लगा है ताकि इजराइल जो अपना इतिहास रहा है उसी इतिहास को दोहराते हुए एक बार फिर इस मुश्किल की घड़ी में तमाम संकटों का सामना करके आगे बढ़ सके।
For now, Holocaust survivors are also plentiful in Israel, of course because of the dark history of that particular region. For a Holocaust survivor to now be looking out for the missing family members is such a tardy task. Ruth Haran, an 87-year-old Holocaust survivor and a Be'eri kibbutz resident, is missing 10 members of her family who are now believed to have been kidnapped by Hamas gunmen. During an interview to an Israeli channel, she pleads, please send them free.
Please send them free. Please do everything in order to free them. They are the best of our country. It is impossible to describe. It is impossible to describe creative, people-loving human beings. At night, I was watching TV and I realized that something was going on. The time was 8 a.m. I was not calm. I called my dear son, Avshalom, and he didn't answer, again and again. I called Shoshan. I called everyone, and no one answered. I called Sharon, my daughter.
We don't have any certainty that our family is alive and that they're safe. And that's the first thing that we were asking. Whoever has the contact, whoever has the ability to make sure and demand that Hamas gives us proof that our family is alive and that they are all safe and that they are together. That's the first thing that we want. We're shifting between survival mode, that we need to do stuff and we need to create contacts and we have missions to do, and to being together and hurting and crying and just mainly when we go to sleep and when we wake up, that's the most difficult times.
On the other hand, people in Gaza have resorted to drinking salt water amid increased demand on resources in the south. With the continued Israeli siege, a resident of Khan Yunis has also given us a unique perspective. Take a closer look.
Now we're filling up with salt water. I'm ready to drink the salt water. What else can we do? We're forced to do this, and thank God. Because there are so many people inside the camp, there is no water. So I thought I'd volunteer, bring a rickshaw to get water from areas that are further away. Dangerous areas, farmland, difficult areas that are close to the occupation, empty lands.
So salty water is certainly a problem, but bodies are still being recovered from rubble in Gaza's Jabalia refugee camp. Take a look for yourselves. And as I was, talking about, people flocked to the Rafah border in hope of a brief ceasefire in southern Gaza to let foreign passport holders out and aid and relief material for Gazans in on Monday. But instead, Israel's bombing was the heaviest in 9 days. And according to Gaza residents, as they prepared to invade by land, hope is certainly diminishing.
People here. These people here live. It's not life.
Palestinians and foreign nationals flocked towards the Rafah crossing on Monday, seeking to flee across the Egyptian border. But as food, water and fuel run short in Gaza, hopes for a brief ceasefire in the south to let foreign passport holders leave and aid get in were dashed, as Israel intensified its bombardment ahead of an expected ground assault. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office said there was no truce, hours after Egyptian security sources told Reuters an agreement had been reached on Rafah. Gaza residents said the overnight Israeli strikes were the heaviest in 9 days of conflict, since the attack on Israel by Hamas militants that killed 1,300 people, the bloodiest single day in the state's 75-year history. As US Secretary of State Antony Blinken arrived in Israel for talks on Monday, Iran said the United States should be held to account for its role in the conflict. In Khan Yunis, rescuers pulled the bodies of children from the rubble. They belonged to the Zugmat family, and they'd fled bombing in northern Gaza to take refuge with relatives. Abid Rabaya is a neighbour.
We were inside the house when we saw bodies scattering, flying through the air. The bodies of children who have nothing to do with the war. They were safe at home and they knew nothing. Their bodies were thrown into the air.
Authorities in Gaza say a quarter of the 2,750 people killed in the bombardment have been children. Another 1,000 people are missing, believed to be under the rubble. Israeli planes bombed 3 headquarters of the Civil Emergency and Ambulance Service in Gaza City, killing 5 people and paralysing rescue services in those areas, health officials said. Fuel reserves at all hospitals in the enclave are only expected to last another 24 hours, putting thousands of patients at risk, the United Nations Humanitarian Office said early Monday.
Well, shifting our focus to the other top global story that we must present for you. The Amazon River fell to its lowest level in over a century on Monday. Now this as a severe drought continues to upend life in the Brazilian rainforest. It has left boats stranded, cutting off food and water supplies to remote villages. The port of Manaus recorded 44.6 feet of water on Monday, compared to 57.7 feet just a year ago. That is the lowest level since records began in 1902. Rapidly drying tributaries to the mighty Amazon have left boats completely stranded. While high temperatures are suspected of killing more than 100 endangered river dolphins, the drought is not helping that cause as well. The port of Manaus, the region's most populous city, at the meeting of Rio Negro and the Amazon River, recorded 13.59 meters of water on Monday compared to 17.60 just a year ago. That is the lowest level since records began in 1902, passing a previous all-time low set back in the year 2010. Now the drought has affected about 4.8 lakh people, especially in the area where Manaus is located.
I came to announce resources for high and medium complexity healthcare for the Amazonian population and also for basic care, which today also has the reinforcement of MICE medicos and multidisciplinary teams.
And well, that's all the time we have for you in this edition of our updates on Israel and Hamas war and the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. We're going to continue to keep our keen focus on the ground. Lots more coming right on the other side. Don't go anywhere.
Literally every major power in the world is gearing up with its own digital currency. And so is India. But India's UPI has taken digital transactions to the next level. So, with UPI already available, what exactly is the use case for the e-rupee?
This and more streaming on world's first news OTT. News9 Plus, download now.
Three years after the deadly Galwan clashes, India has doubled the pace of infrastructure creation on the border. India's Border Road Organization is accomplishing Mission Impossible, creating infrastructure to secure us from our foes across the Himalayas.
Look at China. They don't have to climb up like us. Once they are on the Tibetan plateau, the construction work, the maintenance work, everything is fairly easy.
On India's 77th Independence Day, an all-women unit of Border Roads Organization led by Colonel Ponung Dobing inaugurated the world's highest motorable road. Ladakh is strategically important for India. It is the only place where the Indian Army faces both its adversaries. Ladakh is a high-altitude desert. Temperatures of -20 to -30 degrees and low oxygen levels here make survival tough. Being stationed in the sensitive